Now, officials from the Ministry of Education were recently brought before a joint select committee in Parliament to address some issues as it relates to early childhood care and education centres, or ECCE. Now, while there were a lot of issues with private institutions, there were some concerns raised at public institutions as well. And so this morning we are joined by the president of the Trinidad and Tobago Unified Teachers Association, or TUTA, Mr. Martin Lumpkin, to address some of the challenges faced at these public ECCE centres. Mr. Lumpkin, good morning.
Good morning, and thank you for having me this morning.
Of course. ECCE sector. Let's start off with the value that it plays, because I think we know primary school, we know secondary school. We also understand the purpose of the private institutions as well. But what role does the ECCE Centre play in our local education landscape?
Over the years, we would have taken the ECCE sector for granted. But successive governments and Ministry of Education has shown that they value, and our teachers themselves value, what the ECCE sector does. It's the foundation for all our students going into the higher levels. And if we don't set a proper foundation, then you're going to get problems higher up. We are the, I can talk at the primary school level. If the children don't have the proper training and culturalization, as well as the being able to interact, those interpersonal skills, and so we will face trouble at the infant level, and it usually, hinders the education going forward.
What are the age group that we usually see at the centres?
Age group will be roughly 2.5 to 5 years. And as we speak about that, our legislation speaks about the legal age for schooling for 5 years. So we have been representing our ECC sector to have the legislation change. In conversation with the ministers of education, they would have indicated that they have prepared legislation changes, but is presently before the Attorney General. And this is quite a while, a few months now.
Now, Mr. Lumpkin, what exactly we want to change? You want to have it from 2.5 years to 4, and then to 5, or 2.5 years to 5, and then they move on to primary schools?
Well, the legal age should be 2.5 going upward. Because
okay.
Right now it's 5 to, I think it's about 12.
This is primary school?
Yeah.
Right.
Right. But we would like it to start from 2.5, so that the legal age would include the ECCE students as well.
Okay, I think I now understand what you're saying. And some of the major, let's jump right in, some of the major issues affecting the ECC. You mentioned, for example, the legislation that you're hoping that can change.
Yes.
But what are some of the other issues facing teachers and children at the centres? Let's start with teachers first.
Right. Presently, we have challenges with their contract. Now, TUTA as representatives of some of the teachers, because Ministry of Education and CPO likes to ask us the question, do you have bargaining status for these teachers? The answer is no. However, we have members in that sector. So we would represent them at all possible opportunities. And the major one right now is contract. So TUTA frowns upon contract labor. We feel that these teachers should be in the establishment. Once you have established that you need the sector, you need these teachers, why have them on contracts?
Now, just to confirm, Mr. Lumpkin, a contract officer, you want that removed to a public officer? Is
yes,
that it? Okay.
Yeah. So they're brought into the establishment.
Right.
Sorry. So there are many advantages for that. So we are pushing for that in the first instance. However, they are faced with 3-year contracts. So every 3 years, they have to renew their contracts. So at the end of the last period, the contracts were to be renewed. The teachers were asked to reapply. Some of them have been in the sector for many years, over 10 years, asking them to reapply. And then secondly, want to subject them to an interview for a position that they have been holding for a number of years. So TUTA intervened, and the ministry agreed that they do not need to be re-interviewed. However, we are looking at the contract itself as well. The contract is a standard contract used in the public sector. These are specific areas in terms of teaching.
Right.
So it cannot apply. You need to adjust there may be a base, by which you utilize the contract. However, it has to be adjusted to fit the teaching service and the teachers, which the Ministry of Education is not doing. And when we have brought it up with the Ministry of Education, they keep telling us that they are in consultation with the Chief Personnel Officer. But while the grass is growing, the cows are starving, as the proverb says. One of the issues we have, well, with the last contract they asked them to sign, there were only 3 terms of conditions: the length of the contract, the salary, as well as vacation of 20 days. Now, that contract omitted a number of other terms and conditions. So when they sign on to the contract and they have given their assurance that they're taking up the position, the ministry can add in other terms and conditions that may not be related to their jobs. And so we want to guard against that.
Right.
Second,
yes, go ahead, yes.
So secondly, the issue of vacation. The ECC sector is not, it is like the other sectors. So while the other sectors are on vacation, the ECC students are on vacation. However, the ministry is asking these teachers to come out during the vacation. So right now, we're in the second week of the vacation, and these teachers have to come to the centers to do what? There was an agreement with the previous Minister of Education, Minister Garcia, who would have stated quite clearly that these teachers are not required to be at the centers during the vacation. However, it has changed. And the other issue with the vacation, 20 days, they are subjecting these teachers to the times that they feel they should be on vacation.
Now, Mr. Lumpkin, going back a bit, you said that the ECC teachers, they have to be at the centers, although schools are closed and the students are home. Did the ministry identify exactly, are they doing preparation for when the students come out next term, or any sort of rules or responsibilities they gave them as to why they need to be at the centers?
There are no reasons why. We can only speculate. One of the other things, which is quite alarming, they have not employed the cleaners during the vacation. So is it that there's a correlation between not having the cleaners in the centers and the teachers being present?
Being there,
Yeah.
I want to jump ahead to training. Do we see the teachers being trained to handle the students? And this is actually a 2-part question. So are they trained? And secondly, are they trained to handle the special needs students who enter the ECC centers?
So firstly, in terms of the training of the teachers, many of them are qualified with undergraduate, some with masters in terms of the early learning of children.
Right.
So they are qualified in that aspect. In terms of the special needs, many of them are not specifically qualified for that area. And so the Student Support Services Division, the special education teachers, are also utilized in that area as well. But as you know, they are not sufficient to go through the 3 sectors, ECCE straight up to secondary, right? So there is a need for the added resources in terms of the Student Support Services Division to be utilized in those sectors.
Yeah, I like that you mentioned resources, Mr. Lumpkin, because I'm also wondering, what do the ECC centers need for them to, work at full capacity? So, for example, when the Ministry of Education, they were brought before the Joint Select Committee recently, and one of the things that was brought up was that lack of resources, particularly teachers in the classroom. Do you see this challenge at ECC centers as well? Because as I understand it, I think some OJTs are being brought in to assist, right? But they may not have the education or the certification, as you mentioned. And so are we seeing teachers in the classroom, or a full complement, rather, to deal with the students that we have at these centers?
At present, there isn't sufficient teachers at the ECC centers, such that during the lunch period, teachers have to reduce their lunch time, because one can appreciate at that level, the students need more attention and supervision.
Yeah.
And so they have to reduce their lunch period and even break time. So they can't even go to the washroom during our class time, even if it's an emergency, because they have to leave their care, the children unattended. To have OJTs, yes, can help to a point, but the OJTs have their remit as well too, legally what they can do within an education institution. So you have those lack of resources in terms of personnel. Administrators, one administrator to a cluster of schools. That's like a principal having to supervise 3 or 4 schools physically outside of one area.
Yeah.
And that's a challenge for our administrators. They cannot supervise properly. And then you're talking about other resources, cleaning equipment, cleaning products, and then the children at that age, they are very, they need to have hands-on learning, tactile, right? So you're having challenges in terms of getting those as well. Our teachers have to dip into their pockets in order to provide some of these resources.
So, Mr. Lumpkin, what are tutors' recommendations?
Firstly, to get the legislation changed, have these teachers brought on to the establishment, treat the sector as it is supposed to be treated, the importance and the critical nature of the ECC centers throughout Trinidad and Tobago. We need to also continue monitoring the private ECC centers as well too, to have standardization.
Is that under the remit of tutor as well? Does tutor have members within the private organization?
Yes, we do have
as well?
members within the private.
Because a lot of issues were brought up at that GSC.
Yes,
yeah.
So they have some unique challenges and
yes.
issues there as well too,
Yes.
which we are looking at. But the majority of our members are in the public sector.
Right.
And the Ministry of Education, having built these new centers, having established these and established the fact that you need the sector, they're supposed to follow up on building and having these teachers not go through some of the mental challenges that they have gone through. I have said previously in other media, this is like modern day slavery. You're treating these teachers and you're beating them into submission because they've been threatened. If you don't sign a contract, you mightn't get pay, or you're not sure to get employment.
Now, Mr. Lumpkin, do you think the sector will benefit from some monitoring from the ministry? Because that was one of the issues as well, in terms of we have these centers and maybe the officials aren't going out as frequent as they should to monitor the centers to see what sort of services they need, maybe infrastructural upgrades as well. So do you think they can benefit from some monitoring?
Of course, monitoring throughout the entire sector, not only ECC, primary, secondary. Monitoring, though, has to be in a context of what are you looking to do in terms of monitoring. We have some officials who are monitoring and are coming down on our teachers. So you're looking at the other sectors, and they're having them account for some things that they don't necessarily need to, and putting added pressure on our teachers. So in context of monitoring, it has to be towards a certain goal or towards a certain end. You mentioned earlier about the monkeypox, and tutors looking forward to the Ministry of Education coming out with policy, because right now schools are closed, and when school reopens, we do not know what would be the position. However, we feel that the ministry should be looking at preventative or even measures before it even hits the schools. So we are looking forward to that as well too, even from the ECC, because as you know, they're very loving and they're very touching.
In close contact.
Yes. So even in that aspect, there would need to be additional resources in terms of cleaning items and sanitizing and so forth.
I will say though that I know the monkeypox isn't spread as is not easily as transmissible as COVID, but I understand the concern because these are 2.5 to 5-year-olds, so I understand the concern. Mr. Lumpkin, always a pleasure to have you in this morning. I think we're going to have the minister coming and address some of the concerns, but for now, let me thank you so much for coming in this morning, and all the best for the rest of the season.
Thank you very much.
And that was the president of Tutor, Mr. Martin Lumpkin, just sharing some issues and concerns currently affecting the ECCE centers. You're on the Now Morning Show. We're going to take a break and be right back. Stay with us.